Good evening. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Inside Texas Football Channel, powered by InsideTexas.com. I'm Joe Cook. We got Justin Wells. We got Drew Kelson. We may have one more joining us as well if schedule permits. But thank you for joining this great trio. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and of course, head to InsideTexas.com where we are talking a little bit about the end of the season, how the season went. And then we got to look forward to not only the next recruiting class, but the next season. So thank everybody for joining in. And Justin, I know I talked about this with you off air, and Drew, I'll present the topic to you. But Justin, you'll get the first answer. So Drew's got some time to react. Let's grade the season. And I know that things, and I don't want to say the goalposts move, but things change in a 12-team playoff, but there's still an understanding of what's expected at Texas. So with that in mind, and let's go on the plus-minus system, just like they do at UT these days, how do you grade Texas 2024 season?
I mean, I would sound kind of ridiculous if I didn't give them an A. I mean, let's just be honest. What was it, 13 wins? Maybe the second time they've ever done that. Of course, it's an NFL schedule now. It's an NFL season essentially, but you have to give them an A. Now, you don't get the A+. You don't get the 2 thumbs up A+ because you got as far as you did last year, and that's great. That's part of the standard and expectation. But also, you don't get any bonus points in this round, even though they knocked out 2 wins in the playoff. That's part of the reason they're getting an A. Now, the defensive side probably carries a lot of that water. But right now, I mean, I would sound so silly. Anybody would sound silly if it's not an A. If we start talking any higher than that, it's probably a little too fanboy. And if we get any lower than that, we're being pretty critical. And so I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle there with that A. Give me a 90 to 95 average. I think that's basically where Texas was this year. If you're a Texas fan, you better be happy. Because that's the way it is.
Drew, what are your thoughts on the letter grade A- or plus-minus system?
I'm going A-. It's hard for me not to feel like we didn't leave based on the roster. First of all, Sark and staff did an incredible job of getting this roster together, pulling this roster together, both from whether you want to talk about Ryan Wingo as a true freshman, being able to log some minutes more and more as the season went on later on the season, or it's just developing and having Trey Wisner step in, like from a depth standpoint, for acquiring the defensive line. Our defense in and of itself deserves an A+. And between development and portal additions, it's hard to discount that. But I do think we fell short on special teams and offense. So in some ways, we left a lot on the table, and I feel as though we could have done more with this team in different ways. But on the other hand, we were the Final Four in spite of several headwinds throughout the season. Games we could have dropped that would have prevented us from even being in that position. Yeah. It's the second year in a row we've had to play a backup quarterback for multiple snaps in multiple games. And it didn't knock us off track at all. So say what you want. I think A- is the way to go. Really, special teams is what brings it down for me to that A- category. I hope we can get more out of that next year. But beyond that, who can be disappointed with the way this thing unfolded with all of the headwinds and all of the different challenges we had, really starting from camp and then moving forward from there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like we dive into the minutia so much, and we're like, dang, Michael Kern, you're only averaging 40 yards, but you're 13-3. There's so many different ways to go about this. And I've had a developing take when covering Texas sports, especially for, we cover pretty earnestly, or I do, but I think Inside Texas does. We cover pretty earnestly the two of the 3 most successful sports at Texas, in football and baseball. We don't cover swimming, but something kind of applies there too. If you're at this level, football, Final Four, baseball, Omaha, swimming, contending in the top 3. Maybe I'm off my skis or out of my blocks here. But if you're doing that, that's an A+ season or an A season, And then the only way to get to A+ is to be lighting that tower orange with the number 1 on it. So
hey, you could be miserable like nickel is in a coverage. That guy is so sad right now. He's hurting. He's at home punching the air because the Texas Longhorns only won 13 games. And Texas was only relevant until mid-January. And they just signed the number 1 class 6 weeks ago. That guy is just hanging on by a thread, and I'm here with my prayers.
Well, so UT Parking, I feel like you've been pretty measured, like smart fan, high standards, but doesn't go nuts. And so to read this from him is a little bit jarring for me. Shot at the SEC but choked. You're playing Georgia, playoff team. Choked at Ohio State.
These are the fans that have had it good too much.
See,
they've had it way too good for too long.
I'll say this about it. I don't like the word choked. It doesn't. That word bothers me.
It's
because it. But I don't necessarily disagree with UT Parking on that. The choked is the wrong word for me. However, if you're a player at Texas, there's no game we've lost in the last 2 years where you feel like, man, we would have just done this, this, and that. If we would have executed this, they walked away feeling as if they could have won or should have won any of those games that they played. So even from a player perspective, all the games that he just listed, I know for a fact the players feel as though those games were winnable and they should have been won and could have been won. So I don't disagree with the criticism of not executing in those games because I know the players criticize. However, choked just dismisses the fact that we're playing against highly talented coaches, players who recruit and play and train 350 days out of the year. When they're not playing football games, their focus is on football. So it does take the lack of just appreciation and respect for some of the opponents that we lost to. We didn't drop games to lesser opponents, which also takes some respect away from some of those opponents. But we didn't drop games we shouldn't have. However, I do fully disagree with UT Parking, and I think the players would too, that we left a lot on the field that we wish we could have back that would have won those games that we lost. So that's choke may not be the word, but no question, we expected better. And I think even from a player's perspective, they really wish they could have had some of those plays back.
It reminded me of Skip Bayless because he says terms like that a lot because he's, a less than person. So-and-so, they didn't want it enough. Stuff like that.
I hate that. That's my least favorite phrase in sports.
I'm telling you. And now that we've got social media and we've got all these networks and all these platforms to talk about this stuff, that stuff gets amplified by the lowest common denominator when it's not relevant right now. It doesn't work. Drew summarized it just fine. This is not choke. They just left meat on the bone. There were games that second game against Georgia, I thought Texas was the better team. They weren't in Austin. They might have been in Atlanta, but they didn't get it done. And for whatever reason. And so those terms choked and they didn't want it enough or they didn't give it their all, little statements like that. It's way too fair weather for me. It's way too, it's desperate.
It shows players who played don't use the word choke as often as fans do. Let me just say that.
They don't ever use that.
Well, it's not. No, it's just not a word you use.
Not in the Final Four.
That's the thing. Here's a very recent example of choke. Kentucky versus Oakland in the NCAA tournament last year. That's choking. What's another good one? I'm trying to think because college football were such
Will Howard against Oregon the first time.
Again, that's a high stakes game.
I get it. I'm with you. That's why I don't like it. I don't like the term. Real players don't use those words. Only fans do.
Choking is losing to Arkansas when you're an overwhelming favorite this year. But choking is losing to Tennessee and Ole Miss had losses this year that made no sense.
Yes, the Kentucky
lose games. When you lose games you're not supposed to lose, you just lay a flat egg. I mean, you could argue we laid eggs this year and won in spite of the eggs. Like we won in spite of just playing imperfect games. There are teams that lost games in the SEC this year, and they were far more talented and skilled than their opponents, and just went out and choked. That's what I consider choking more than anything else.
Like the thing is, like we see a UT parking, but like Jack Sawyer's good.
Are you sure?
Is good.
Ohio State just won the national championship, Joe. Are you sure?
Like I'm
JT Tumanillo. Are you sure he's going to go in the second round next year?
I can think of far more choking. Like this is low hanging fruit. But like when Oklahoma lost to Kansas last year, I think, to knock them out of the Big 12 title race, like that's a choke, because that's a good team, but a team you're not expected to beat. When you're within a 12-team playoff and then you're within a Final Four, everybody's freaking good. Like, we can have Shaka VCU runs in college basketball. We can have George Mason make the Final Four. We can have UCLA make the Final Four from the first four. And I know they're a blue blood, but they were an 11 seed that year. Indiana didn't have a shot. Boise didn't have a shot. Like, all these teams that made the Final Four, and they were legit real teams. Okay, cool. Like, hey, so okay, then I mean, we're not going to come to an agreement on this one. I get that. So
he never played sports. It's obvious.
I mean, I'm not gonna just say you're wrong and stupid. Like, I don't think that. I'm saying we're not going to come to an agreement. But like, what are we going to say? Like, did Clemson choke? Did A&M choke? Did
Notre Dame?
Did like? I mean, there's so many ways. Fail to succeed at the highest level against the toughest opponent. If you want to call that choking, okay. But I don't see it that way when all these teams are the same.
Do you know what choking is? When your son is stuffing apples down his throat at 3 years old and he's not paying attention to what he's chewing, and all of a sudden I got to do a Heimlich maneuver on my 3-year-old because he's choking on apples. That's actual choking. We're talking about sports. And Drew nailed it. These are athletes. These are players that word's not in their vocabulary. That's something a fan comes up with that likes Skip Bayless, that likes to, look at the worst case scenario at all times. That's really what it is. And he has every right. That's what fans get to do. But that just reminds you of the fandom. Like, there's fans, and then there's people that actually know what they're talking about.
I think I can bridge a gap here. I don't know if I'm right on this UT parking, but when the odds are overwhelmingly in your favor and you do not execute, I would consider that choking. So from a game perspective, playing against Ohio State and losing that game, did we choke? No, I wouldn't say in general that we specifically choke. If you just said at the end of the season, you'll be playing in the semifinal game against Ohio State, who's the eventual national champion, and you lose, I wouldn't consider that choking. I would first and goal from the one when the odds should be considerably and overwhelmingly in your favor, and you do not execute when the odds are in your favor. I completely respect someone, at least from a fan perspective, saying, you know what, that's choking, because the odds were in your favor overwhelmingly. You couldn't have asked to be in a better position than in that situation. So did we choke away the game? No. There were several moments throughout that game we could have taken advantage of, and we failed to do so. But in that particular play, moment, scenario, situation, I completely respect and understand the argument, because the odds should have been overwhelmingly in our favor on the one.
Well, I just had a weird image pop in my head. Unless you're into weird stuff, you can't choke yourself. Someone else has to have their hands around your neck.
Yes.
I don't know if I'll ever top that, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Hey, he's trying. He's trying really hard. He is. He's trying really hard.
He's trying.
And you got to give him a good job, good effort.
Well, terminology.
If we were going to grade his comment, though, I don't think I could give that an A. I would probably say he just wasn't – he didn't comment hard enough. He didn't want it enough.
But I think Chris Bennett made a point in that if Texas lost that, yeah, you're right, Spencer Hogan. If Texas lost that Arizona State game after being up, 17-3 heading into halftime, that kind of counts. I mean, it's even got it's got English Bulldogs all over the country being upset. So, but they didn't. They held on. They pulled the hands of the Sun Devils from around their neck and carried on. Before we get going, I want to talk about some other subjects. Honestly, got kind of deep into that one, but got to show some love to one of our sponsors, and of course, that is Prize Picks. Hey, I'm a college football fan through and through, but I don't know about y'all. Championship Sunday in the NFL or championship weekend even, it really takes the cake for me because it's high stakes games at, home fields. Sometimes you get some blizzards, highest level stuff, and each game gets its own day. And one of the best ways to make it interesting to go and play some daily fantasy sports is to go to Prize Picks. Go ahead and check that out. There's probably some squares to select on Patrick Mahomes, on Josh Allen. Go to the other side. The Eagles and the Commanders, which I know make a lot of people in this chat and maybe even a person on this video extremely happy. A lot of different stuff there. NBA, NHL. I can't wait for the spring training ones because that's going to be really fun to follow. Especially as a fun MLB season gets going. So make sure you go to Prize Picks. If you use the promo code Inside Texas, you can play $5 and get $50 instantly. It's the easiest way to play fantasy sports. And I've been getting a lot of notifications today. It's one of those things. They make some give you some options on your squares that is going to come through. A player having more than half a point. So they make this really fun, really easy. So make sure you go to Prize Picks, use the code Inside Texas, play $5 and get $50 instantly.
I like this question from Roger if you want to throw it at him.
Yeah, go ahead and start reading it. Let me see if I can. There we go. I like this one. Yeah, and you had some stuff on Inside Texas today just about this.
Yeah, this is some good stuff. And this is a no choking hazard comment, Roger. And so I appreciate that. Yes, it does change because Xavier Crowell was number one on the 2027 big board. Him and Landon Williams-Callis, the tailback out of Richmond Randall. Texas and Tashard Choice absolutely love those two guys. So now Crowell's in 2026, and that's the guy. That's a big guy. They want kind of a scat type, and they want kind of a big back. Kind of a thunder and lightning. Right now, Javian Osborne remains the number one tailback, regardless of class on the big board. That is the most important running back prospect in the country. He's actually going to be in Austin this weekend for Junior Day. Tashard Choice was in his house with Chris Gilbert last night doing an in-home visit. The head coaches can't do it yet. It's technically a dead period, but Sark's going to make his way through there as well. Javian absolutely loves. That's the one, okay? But there's going to be two in this 2026 cycle. So now Crowell has got to battle Amari Latimer out of Tyrone down in, I think it's Sandy Creek in Georgia, and KJ Edwards, an East Texas kid out of Carthage. Those are your four guys that if you could get two of those four, I think Tashard Choice in Texas would be really, really happy. Right now, I would say the best outcome is Osborne and Crowell. And that's going to be tough. I think they're in a great spot with Osborne. They're going to have to fight tooth and nail with Michigan. I bet Michigan drops a major bag at him because their top target, Savion Hitler, is starting to trend towards Ohio State.
Savion Hitter.
That's what I said, Hitter. That's what I said. I wanted to choke on it, but you know how it goes. So, hey, at least I'm not pulling a Musk. And so now that they've got Savion Hitter, they love that kid. And so Osborne's probably going to get a lot more from that Michigan side of it. Crowell and Alabama make a lot of sense. And so while Joe starts to gather himself a little bit better, this is a good one today, guys. This was a good one.
Another interesting recruiting thing that we saw pop up, and we had a story on Inside Texas this morning. Longhorns not totally done maybe with the 2025 class. technically there is still a signing day, I think, on that first Wednesday of February, though.
Yeah, there's still a signing day.
It's basically all locked up for most teams, but Texas, Justin is trying to get in with a former Washington State linebacker signee.
You talk about late bloomer. Man, if you watch this guy's tape, I'm shocked he wasn't more highly recruited. I don't know if it's the area, if he was injured. I'm not real sure. We're kind of digging more on his background. But at the end of the day, they always wanted that West Coast linebacker. We talked about the day they hired Johnny Nansen. Don't be surprised if he signs a California-bred or Nevada-bred West Coast linebacker. And that's what A.J. Tuatele, he fits that mold. This kid looks fantastic. He reminds me of one of those USC early 2000s linebackers. He actually took an official visit to USC last weekend. He is supposed to be in Texas this weekend in the official capacity. We're hoping to get some more from him before and after that trip. But Texas wanted another linebacker anyway. And if you watch this kid's tape, I think it's a no-brainer. He's just a late bloomer. Sometimes guys aren't ready when signing day comes. Sometimes they're just not in that position yet, or they haven't been discovered or exposed. And so this is just another kid that Texas needed another linebacker in this cycle, I feel like. And if they can get lucky and bring this kid in, man, he is tremendous. If you get a chance, go to Inside Texas. We got a good story on him. Got a little bit of huddle up there as well. He is he'd be a real – this is the kind of kid that if he's your floor of this class, that cycle, man, it just continues to get better.
This is a really fun time of year where not only are prospects visiting, but Texas is kind of determining what its preferred targets are. Means there's a lot of huddle watching, a lot of evaluation, a lot of stuff like that, discussion, real fun evaluation in the weed stuff going on over at Inside Texas. So make sure you check that out. We'll dive into the Junior Day stuff a little bit more at the end, but kind of to go back to the grading the season discussion and to make sure oxygen flows freely into our lungs. What do y'all think were the biggest culprits? And I'm not talking about individual plays, and I might be talking about players, but like areas, sides of the ball, deficiencies. Drew, what do you think some of the biggest deficiencies that Texas had this year? What do you think they were that really just made getting past Ohio State and just being a national championship level team really tough to accomplish?
I mean, for starters, it's hard for me to look past just the run game in general, regardless of the reasons, regardless of the types of plays or schemes we ran. And honestly, this is Trey Whit, like these guys balled out. Like they gave it everything they had this season. I think fumbles hurt us early with a few guys and really prevented some guys from developing. I really think we could have developed a bit more at that position had we didn't have some guys just fumbling a little bit earlier in the season. But I think the main thing that was missing when I go back and look at a Jonathan Brooks, when I look at Bijan Robinson and Roschon, when I look at these guys, it's like what made them so different? And I spoke to Paul about this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I think we talked about this. Just having running backs that can make guys miss in those smaller spaces. I realized when you go back and look at our film, I mean, Bijan Robinson, he led the country in missed tackles or yards after contact. I mean, why is that? It wasn't because plays were perfectly blocked every play. It was because guys were there and he made them miss, whether in space, when the ball was thrown to him out in space or in between the tackles. At the end of the day, you have to be able to make guys miss when you have those one-on-ones in space. And there were just games and times where we were just a foot grab or just one defender away from an explosive play. And I can't say whether or not, I don't like to hypothesize, but it's just hard for me to feel as though having the backs we've had in the last couple of years, those tackles could have been missed or would have been missed in those spaces. And I think we need to find that again. The offensive line and the blocking is not always going to be perfect, but I do think making guys miss in space, when you have that one last defender you need to make miss, I think that's a huge part of it. But also just kind of reevaluating the offensive line. I think the other part to this, beyond just making guys miss in space, is Like, how are we going to retool, or whether it be schematically or just how we coach up our guys to be physical in the run game and demand the yards that we want and need when we need them. We can call it what it is, but it is different in this league. And when you get to the higher parts of just the higher echelon of what college football can be, games against Georgia and Ohio State were completely different than games against some of our lesser opponents. So we can't dismiss the vast disparity between how we looked against great defenses versus defenses that were overwhelmed. And I think that's something we need to address specifically on the offensive side of the ball. It's just really establishing a run game we can rely on, making guys miss, but having a cohesive offensive line that can move people when we absolutely need them to be moved.
So I'm trying to I think I've got it pulled up on PFF. I'm looking at Bijan Robinson's 2022 season. So his Doak Walker award-winning season. They have a stat called yards after contact per attempt. Bijan had 4.17 yards after contact per attempt. He had 1,071 yards after contact that year. Wisner, 3.08. And of a guy who had 1,000 total yards, 695 were after contact. And that speaks to his toughness, because you could tell that it took Bijan and more so Roschon.
Effortless for Bijan. It was effort for Wisner.
Yes. But still, like, it was a full yard that Bijan had after contact per attempt over Wisner. And, I think that says a lot about just the skill set he had. I'd like to know how that compares maybe to Baxter's, but that's a big area, just looking at areas that were deficient already, just entering the season. Justin, what are some of the areas you think really were just, like I said, the governor on what prevented Texas from becoming a national title team?
Special teams. Simple as that. You don't worry about a kicker until he starts missing. Bert Auburn didn't have a problem kicking field goals till this season. He was pretty good the last 2 years. Punting was the same way. Yeah, Michael Kern wasn't terrible, but you could tell in big games when they needed to change fields, it didn't always happen. And, Jeff Banks will be the one that stands on a table and tells you it's the third phase of the game. It has to be as important as the offense and defense, blah, blah, blah. But the 1 year where special teams, we haven't had special teams problem in a long time. We haven't spoke about special teams problems in a long time. You're going through guys like Michael Dixon, Justin Tucker. These guys were on point. And so I feel like, and it really reared its head in the SEC championship. Bert Auburn makes one of those field goals, Texas wins the SEC, and they don't technically choke, according to Nicholas in the coverage. And so that, to me, it's special teams. I hate hammering those guys, but you got to be better. And when they had to change the kicker for the Ohio State game, that gave me the worst feeling in the world, because if that game was close, it was going to come down to that. And if it came down to that, I didn't like Texas' chances.
So there's the obvious not missed extra points, because to Bert's credit hadn't happened, but missed points from not making field goals. That's obvious.
Not deep ones, close ones.
The 38-yarder,
the 40 range. The 40 range.
You would hope that you have a better conversion rate than what Bert did.
Yes, especially when he's proven it on the field for 2 years that he can be reliable.
But I'm gonna look at a different kicking game. Kickoff and kick return, it's fine. No complaints.
Silas gave us a little high blood pressure, but it was worth it.
Kickoff and kick
off. Okay, I got you.
Like, because, Stone did his job. Golden was good, but, take it at the 25. That usually works out. Kern averaged this season 41.6. Sanborn last season averaged 45.7. and he also had 11 more punts of 50 or more yards because, you look at an average,
Right.
sometimes it takes a 40-yard punt. Yeah, that means that if you're having that many, that's more possessions that opposing teams have to pick up another first down, have to, get a little bit closer to be in goal to go. It's just more plays that opposing offenses have to get in order to score on you. And I think that's a credit to Texas defense this year that they were fantastic in, not in scoring defense despite the punting disadvantage that they had compared to last year. But then you also think about, look, Silas was a heart attack. He wasn't an All-American, and Xavier Worthy was an All-American. So that's two areas of punting where you're losing some yardage that you would pick up to make possessions shorter, to make opponent possessions longer. And that while the defense was able to make up for it a little bit more, the offense was not. Which
the red zone worries, I think, exacerbated the missed field goals. Because if you convert half of those red zones into touchdowns, you're not kicking those field goals. You don't have to. And so I think they were almost put in that position inadvertently when they weren't scoring, when they were getting close to the sticks, because you had to turn around and rely on a field goal.
Jack Bomeister, who's assumedly coming in here to try to win a starting job.
The boomer.
He averages in his career 3 years at Utah, which a little bit at altitude, 43.6. So I know punting is so exciting, but I think that's really, when you think about hidden yardage, it's so cliche, but like those 17 yards on a possession to possession really do.
It adds up.
Make a difference, especially over the course of a game. Artistically incredible. Was not having a healthy bond another factor? I think so. I know people may complain about what he did at Texas. A lot of that had to do with injury. He wasn't the same, and maybe he gets discouraged as a result of that.
I agree, Joe. It's some of that,
right?
Not all of that. There's other factors that were in that right there. The injury is part of it. Talk about no return on investment.
So before we get into that, because that's another topic I want to talk about before Junior Day, got to show a little bit of love to our other sponsor. And tonight, that is our friend Laura Baker. So with that, LC, take it away.
Hi, I want to tell you about Laura Baker. If you're looking for a new home in the 512 or even at this point, let's face it, 737 area code, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. As a member of the elite Andy Allen team with Keller Williams, Laura has helped Longhorns find the home of their dreams in Central Texas. Just ask our resident sex symbol, Ian Boyd, who moved all the way from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Laura can help you find what you're looking for in the 512, the 737, or even parts of the 254 and the 210. Just, give her a call at 512-784-0505. Her email is in the description, as well as the rest of her contact details. She's a friend. Give her a call.
All right. Real quick, one thing, because I know it's going to be a topic over the course of the coming off season, especially as the spring window comes up. I'm really curious what y'all think of the portal class that we have seen go through this season and how it compares maybe to, other teams' hit rates. So let me see if I can get this pulled up. Texas brought in one. Hold on. Let me get this on the screen for everybody and zoomed in so everybody can see. And this goes along with what Paul Wadlington wrote on Inside Texas today, a lot of it about defensive tackles. Texas had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 transfers come in. So we'll go through a lot of these guys we can go through real quickly. Velton Gardner, we're glad you're on the roster.
For the draft, Joe.
Everybody's declaring for the draft. I should have declared for the draft after I graduated in 2016. Should have been there. What'd you say?
I said you should have.
Still waiting on my opportunity. Appreciate him coming here. Unfortunately for the eye injury, did not work out. Lole, and this is what Paul's article was really talking about. Are you looking for guys who will make an impact, or you're looking for guys who will impact perception?
Perception.
With Lole, you got a guy who made an impact.
You think so? Yeah, over Savea, he did. You're right.
So we're 1 for 1 there. Javion Cole, I don't think he was brought in to start. I think he was brought in for depth and to develop, and he decided Texas was where he wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And as a result, decided to transfer out, committed to Arizona. He'll probably start there, be fine. Probably not what you wanted. So that's you wish you may have been able to hang on to him. So
I feel like Sark's going to take a Javion Cole in every portal opportunity, an extra corner with experience in case somebody goes down in the secondary.
Bill Norton, everything you wanted from him.
Especially the second half of the season. He really came on when it got colder outside.
Yeah. Tia Savea did not. So, okay.
Good practice. Good practice player.
Yeah. Amari Niblack, and that's one that unfortunately we are going to see leave Texas. I think Eric's mentioned this one a lot. Didn't want to block, didn't really want to catch either.
No.
Kendrick Blackshire.
He'll fit in A&M fine.
Kendrick Blackshire, we hardly knew you. Silas Bolden. Got everything you wanted out of him.
Hey,
Isaiah
they got
Bond.
not just special teams from him. When the receivers were dinged up, Silas Bolden popped in there the second half of the season, made plays after the catch. I thought he was invaluable even in that special team, past the special team stuff.
And we'll never forget the OU game. Like when you ball out in that game, it's memorable. Silas Bolden made his mark in that one this year.
Amen. Good call.
I'm going to put Bond in the NA. I think he's in the middle between dud and success.
I think Texas needed what they got from Bond this year to be successful. I think they need a little bit more, but we're just being picky at that point. I think Bond I would consider Bond successful because I feel like he was productive when he was out there for the most part.
Which leads to the last three. Trey Moore. Trey Moore, Makuba, and Matthew Golden, in the words of Borat, great success.
Yes.
But that's all to illustrate the portal is a very fickle thing. It is hit or miss. In high school, you still will look for guys like Quinn Ewers. You will still look for guys like A.D. Mitchell. You will still look for guys like, who am I missing? Andrew Makuba. But you can't live there, which leads us to Justin, before we get out of here, the junior day and some of the big names coming in. We talked a little bit about this last on recruiting intel, just how it's a little bit smaller. But what are some of the ways that you've seen this staff try to take advantage of their 13-3 season?
It's similar to last year. They made a great run last year. They signed a top 5 class last year, and then they went in with a lot of momentum in January and February. And, Texas fans aren't really used to – they're used to it now, Steve Sarkisian's approach, whereas Mac Brown wanted to take guys early, shut the class down before you started fall camp, and have everybody engaged, ready to be married in December and February. Sark wants to be – he wants to take as much possible time as he can to evaluate. If you thought the last 2 classes started slow, I hate to break it to you. I think this class is going to start especially slow because they do have a back-to-back team in the semifinal to brag about. They do have a number 1 ranked team coming into class already who has 19 or 20 guys on campus already. Like that momentum is so. When Texas is winning, buddy, it ain't hard to recruit. And all you got to do is talk to some of those kids. A lot of people ask us, how did the seniors feel about, going to these games in 2024? It wasn't about seniors. It was about the juniors. And all that success that Texas saw and had, those juniors were in attendance when they did. And I think that's why they're in such a great position with some of the best players in the country. They got Dia Bell locked in. What does Dia want to do coming into Austin? He wants to help build the class. He knows he's responsible for that. He wants to work on a John Turntine, the number 1 player in the state. He wants to work on a Javian Osborne, the number 1 running back on the big board. He wants to work on Caden Finley. Jermichael's son is ready, and he is a dude, and he's got 25 offers, and Texas is in a great spot with him. They want to make sure they get those things done. And so this junior day, the list is a little smaller than we've seen in the past, and I think that's because Texas is going to be picky. They were pretty picky last year. I don't think fans understand. They were picky down the stretch. There were at least a dozen kids that were 4-stars that could have easily been in this cycle, but Sark decided to pump the brakes, and get not only culture fits, physical fits, emotional fits, guys that kind of fit the culture that they're building right now. And I think those are a good foundation there. So junior day is going to be fun because it's going to give us a sense, and fans a sense, of where the priorities are, who's kind of getting more attention and who's not getting as much attention. You'll start to see pieces start to fall into place by spring ball. When you see guys coming on campus those weekends in the spring when they're scrimmaging, that is your sign that Texas really wants that player. When you see him hit campus in June for official visits, that's the next level of sign that, hey, Texas really wants this, because they don't bring in many guys. If we counted how many took official visits last year and how many didn't sign with Texas, that number would be very, very small, because that's the way they are. So I think Sark's going to take their time. I think they're going to enjoy it. I think right now they're the hottest team in college football. They've played so well. If you talk to players, there's 3 schools that get mentioned: Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. And Ohio State only in the last couple of weeks because of our buddy Tyler finally finding success in the fraudulent Ryan triple third base day. And so at the end of the day, it's intimate, it's more inclusive, it's more private, but I think that's the way Sark wants it. Look, it's taxing when you bring 60 or 70 prospects in for one day. I mean, you are really pushing it. And that's what Sark did those first couple junior days. He didn't do that last year. They're not going to do that this year. They're in such a better place right now. And I will say this again, when Texas is winning, recruiting is easy. And in this NIL era and him being so particular in the portal, I think Texas, this 2026 class is going to be fantastic. This is going to be a year that they can cherry pick, that they can go out of state and find guys at the right spots, the right positions, maybe grab another Justice Terry, or maybe grab a potentially Chris Henry Jr. out of California. That's what's going to be fun, and I can't wait to cover each and every one of it.
I feel like we're going to learn a lot about players standing not only with visits, but I wonder which recruits are going to be so honest where they talk about, like, they told me I was going to get this much revenue share money. And I don't know how
much of that.
Well, once that settlement gets approved, we'll see how much that factors in. Drew, any big thoughts on recruiting, junior day, anything like that?
I mean, Sark has had his approach in place since day one. I mean, for one, he wants guys who wants to come to Texas, but two, yes, the market dynamics are going to shift on a lot of these guys from today versus August versus December. Yeah. So you don't want to set the floor for anybody unless you really want them, unless you really know they want to be at Texas, unless you really truly believe they can lead the class and anchor a class. I think every major school throughout the country they're always trying to find their quarterback as soon and as early as possible, and maybe their top defender or their top recruiting defender as early as possible. But beyond that, you're looking for fits, and you're just waiting on the market dynamics to shift. And sometimes you get guys where they come in a little earlier. You kind of know where you have them economically, and things come up a little bit different as they develop. And you have to come back to the table. And so I know you don't want to be Sark and the team. They don't want to be in a position where someone's holding their feet to the fire at the end of a recruiting period. And it's hard to avoid that, but you have to understand the market dynamics are changing as other schools have needs fulfilled or players drop out. They're going to come after your players. So that there really is no benefit to doing anything other than developing the relationship, digging deeper into what these players are looking for, making sure they see Texas as much as possible, really all the way up until the season. And then just kind of taking it from there and knowing some guys are just going to be fighting to the bitter end. So it's worked. And you have the portal as a backup. So if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it.
And I'll tell you one other little factor I think has become more and more prevalent, and that's Sark and these guys are not only recruiting players, they're recruiting parents. The parents have always been involved, obviously, but now with NIL, they're really involved. Some just want to see their son happy. They want fair market value, want to see their son happy, and they don't try to go around that. Some of them make life very, very difficult. And I think that's going to be something we watch in 2026. Sark's not just going to go for the best player. You're going to have some good parents. You're going to have a good foundation around you, a good support system, because we're seeing more and more, with no names thrown out, there are some kids that have issues. They're having, and they're unraveling on social media. They're unraveling in our news cycles lately. And I think a lot of that is pushing this so fast, so hard, so soon. Do it right now. And you really got to make sure they got a good foundation with parents. And I'll give you an example. Trevor Gooseby, best parents in the freaking world. Like, they are so down to earth and so easy to deal with and so easy to handle. I think moving forward, that's going to be as important a factor as a guy having a 5-star beside this ranking. How are mom and dad acting when things are going well, but better when things aren't going as well?
I think there's one good last question. Roger G. I'm going to throw it to Justin. And hey, I was looking through the cornerback offers. Unless you want to talk Jamari and Vincent, I don't know if that counts. There's not a cornerback offer in the state of Texas out in the 2026 class right now. Technically,
no, but Jalen Lott is a corner, and his offer is for only cornerback. Jermaine Bishop, who's going to be on campus, the super duper athlete, Michael Bishop's nephew, I believe. He's going to be on campus. His offer is only for cornerback. He's probably those are probably your top two on the cornerback board. They love Jamari and Vincent. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what his offseason looks like. Donovan Webb is just a big safety. Like, he is 6'2", 200 pound. Like, he is a big safety. He's not a corner. Right now it's Jalen Lott, Jermaine Bishop, and I have a feeling they're going to go out of state and try to snag one or two, either in Georgia, Florida, or in California.
Looking right now, it says there are 7 offers listed, and like I said, only Vincent and that one's down
is low this cycle.
Whereas
offensive tackles are a dime a dozen in 2026 in Texas, corners and safeties are a little bit more to the middle, and so it's gonna you gotta be able to weigh that. I think that's why Texas will probably sign 2 in-state wide receivers, and they're going to sign 2 out-of-state wide receivers. You have to go where the talent is. In Texas, it's very cyclical. And right now, the secondary in 2026 just isn't that sexy. 2027, it gets a lot better.
I will say this, Justin. When you look at those offers at cornerback, they're all big guys that can grow into a frame. I mean, 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", 6'2". Like, these are big.
All of them, except for Bishop.
Absolutely. All of them except for maybe one. So there's a theme here. I mean, Sark, there aren't many offers going out because they're very specific about what they're looking for at those positions.
Yeah.
They got to fit. They got to mold. It's fun to track, and this is the place to track it. So thank you for watching. Drew, Justin, thank y'all so much for joining. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and, of course, head to InsideTexas.com. We're going to have full coverage of that junior day over the course of Saturday. Should be exciting. We'll get the over-under question. Maybe we address that later, but we'll address it on the site a little bit more readily than we would here. So make sure you head to InsideTexas.com. Thank you to Prize Picks. Thank you to Laura Baker. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com.